Hey, listen, we got some things that we gotta discuss. How we can affect the system and make it better for us. But first, we gotta start with the man in the mirror. Open your third eye and the vision's gonna be much clearer. We are revolutionary. We are visionary. And we stand resolute on those who pollute the minds of many. Revolutionary. We are visionary. And we stand resolute on those who pollute the minds of many, y'all. This is the Revolutionary Social Work Podcast, y'all.
All right. Well, welcome to another episode of the Revolutionary Social Work Podcast. I think this is episode 10. I'm Ace.
And I'm your other host, Alicia.
And we are very privileged and blessed to be joined by Charla this morning. How's it going, Charla?
Hello. How are you?
Good. Where are you at?
I'm in Indianapolis. So it's afternoon for me. It's not morning, but
Yeah,
I'm in Indianapolis.
Indianapolis. That's an area of the United States that I just don't, I haven't been around. I think I passed through a little bit, but I just don't have any real life experience. So is it winter there yet?
It's not winter here yet. And I think a lot of people kind of throw up their hands and really don't know what Indianapolis is, or they assume it's like middle of nowhere. There's nothing going on. But I will say there are lots of things that I do like about Indianapolis. I'm within 3 hours of Detroit, Chicago, Cincinnati, Louisville. It's like a nickname of Crossroads of America, and it really is like a hub that allows you to get to a lot of places. So it's not nowhere. We have basketball, we have football, we've had the Super Bowl. We aren't like nowhere.
We have things.
Yeah, we get forgotten.
You're kind of the opposite of our life experience over the last few years because we've been all over Alaska, and so even if there are some people there, it's usually pretty isolated from, like you said, being able to drive somewhere else. We took a road trip through the West in California several years ago, and then we drove over there through Philly and New York and stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know, it was a while ago.
It was a while.
But it's been a while since we've been in the thick of it.
Yeah, but I bet you guys have like natural landscape and things like that I don't get to experience.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can kind of see the snow in the background.
Yeah.
We're definitely
beautiful.
in winter wonderland status already. But yeah, it's so crazy to me to think about all of, just across the United States, all the different seasons and how different they are at this stage especially. Some people are still very much in fall. We are very much in winter already. You have Hawaii, who is just summer year round. So it's so interesting to know where people are living.
What is the weather like in the wintertime there?
We have a for sure winter that will come closer to February is when it really starts hitting. It'll get cold here in a couple of weeks, I'm sure, but we won't have to put on like snow boots and coats until mid to late January. It'll be like fleeces and things like that until then. And then it'll be cold,
nice.
Very cold until the end of March. And then we'll
What's
thaw back
cold?
out.
How's cold?
Definitely like below freezing, definitely in the single digits. We will get snow, mounds of snow. But what I've learned, because I did my MSW in Tennessee, and so they have snow too, but their snow is totally different than the snow we get in Indianapolis. In Tennessee, that snow was wet and heavy. Here, people use snow blowers. So, it's snow, but it doesn't mean the whole city shuts down. We just navigate around snow.
Yeah, we just moved here. We're in milder temperatures, all things considered with Alaska. But last year we lived in Fairbanks, which is, I think it's known as somewhat the coldest and the warmest place in Alaska between summer and winter. But it was like 40 below zero for weeks at a time. It was hard, and it was dark all day.
It was so hard. And it gets to a point where, because I think with the wind chill one time it got to minus 56. And then when it gets to like minus 20, you're like, oh yeah, we can go outside again. And it's just so, your mindset changes. You acclimate to these extreme weathers. So yeah, that was an experience. I'm glad we experienced it.
Yeah, hopefully, not again for that long at least.
Yeah, that I can't imagine. That like darkness, that scares me.
That's the hardest part. The cold is one thing, but it's even now here. We get more daylight here, but still, it's getting dark at like 4:00, and it's hard. I'm working on the computer all day, and then my eyes start bulging, and it's hard.
Yeah. It is hard. Last thing I'll say on that though, because definitely the darkness is hard, but for me, the 24-hour, the 23-hour daylight was really hard. It kind of it messed with my brain. That was hard. And I
can
know that
imagine.
not as
I hadn't
hard
even
for
thought
you.
about that side of it. Hard to
was-
sleep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. When I used to be, before I met Alicia, I was living up here further north, and I was a suicide intervention trainer. And one of the things that I was very surprised about, we had always looked at Alaska, you know, like has a lot of suicides, but we thought that they all happen in the winter because it's darkness and seasonal affective disorder, but it's actually not true. The majority of suicides happen in the daylight times. And I think it is like kind of a little bit what you said. While daylight can be better than darkness all the time, in some ways, it can also make you a little bit crazy, and you don't get those, it's the opposite of, you don't get those rhythms of the sun in the winter, but you get a little bit too much of it. And so I think people's bodies and their minds can go a little bit crazy sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah, because that natural kind of rest that's initiated by the darkness isn't there. And then other people are kind of go, go, go. And if you have those, you know, depressive symptoms and the suicidality, it's like, well, I don't want to do that, but I should be doing that. And
There's so much
hard.
beauty. There's so much beauty though in the connectedness between our minds, our bodies, and the planet, and how it operates and how it functions. And so, yeah, there's a piece of me hearing what you're sharing and gets me kind of excited and just affirms a knowing that I have of how we are interconnected and everything is connected. And yeah,
I think too, I didn't intend to talk about this, but you know, when you look at our human history, most of us that are in the United States now got here through a variety of ways, obviously. But I think sometimes we don't think enough about or reflect on where what our bodies might have been used to in the past and what's passed down to us. And if we find ourselves in an environment that's different than that, how our bodies, our consciousness, you know, it can be confused. We don't think about it that way enough. You know, some of us are in areas that we haven't been historically. I guess almost all of us in the United States of America, not all of us, but and who knows, you know, how we've gotten confused in the memory our bodies and our consciousness keeps.
Right.
We don't think about it enough.
No.
I have a friend who I talk to about these kind of things often, and she talks about the ways, the relationship between all of these things you're saying and then food also, and how those foods interact with our bodies. I think that there's so much for us to learn and discover if we allow ourselves to believe and like move with the belief, you know, like it's one thing to like know, we know that our minds and bodies are connected to the planet and everything is connected. And we like know that even in a scientific level, but if we could actually move to living and responding to that reality, I just think we could all do so much better. But yeah, that's why we have to have things like a revolutionary social work podcast, because that's not the normal.
Exactly. We don't talk about these things enough. And we're going to say something.
I was just going to say, I think most social workers, when we bring up or talk about something like this, kind of look at us like,
why?
what are you talking about?
Yeah. And that's a huge part of the work that I do, is focusing on those natural rhythms, like the circadian rhythms, but also as women, like our natural cycles and those rhythms as well. And yeah, we don't think about that enough when we're in therapy and working with our clients. We miss that part. So yeah, we talk about this a lot on the podcast.
I think that is one of the side effects of approaching this work of social work like a job and not so much like a vocation. Like I really think of my role as a social worker as a vocation. This is how I choose to live my life and how I choose to serve the community. And the role that I play in the community is that I am that of a social worker. It's not like my identity, but it's the role that I've taken on in our community and how I want to help and give back. And I think the way that it's positioned for a lot of people is they think of social work as a job, and they got trained for a job and they do a job, and that's all that it is. And when you allow yourself to be part of the job and let it not just be like the work I do to make money to survive, but the role that I play in the community, then you can recognize those patterns and get to a deeper level. But I think, you know, probably not your audience, but there's a subset of our profession where a lot of folks this is just a job, and they approach it as just a job, and they think of it as just a job. And those of us who challenge and push back and suggest something else are a nuisance because they just want to do the job.
Yep.
But I don't think that that should stop us from operating in the truth of what we know.
Yep, exactly. And I think that that brings me to what really drew us to you, Charla, is when we saw that statement of disruptor of the status quo. It's very much in line with what we're talking about now, but with revolutionary social work, because we are encouraging people to do that internal work first, be able to revolutionize your own thoughts, your own values, your own beliefs and ideas about the world, so that you can go out and be that role in the community. And so I'm just interested, what does that mean for you, being a disruptor of the status quo?
You know, if I'm going to be honest with you, when I came up with that, there's this push-pull I often have when I have conversations or I'm talking about anything of like how I came to do my practice and all of that. Like, maybe we can call it, we can diagnose it if we need to. Maybe I'm somewhat neurospicy, right? But the way that my brain operates, the way that I operate, I don't need a diagnosis to just know this is who I am. Is that I don't always notice that something is a thing until other people show me that it's a thing. So when I was saying disruptor of the status quo, it's just another way to say change maker, which is what social workers say that they are all the time. I believed when I was going through the program and I was learning to be a social worker and I was training, I was going through all of that with an orientation to believe that we were all disrupting the status quo, that the role of social work was to challenge things as they've always been done and look for ways to make sure that the marginalized and the people who were on the outside could somehow have access and have equitable materials or whatever they need to be able to exist in the society, that we were supposed to push back on things from both a macro perspective and on an individual level. Like, that's what I thought the job was. It hasn't been until like actually working in the field and meeting other social workers and engaging with them that I over and over again get faced with the reality of like, oh, that's not what you guys were hearing. That's not what you were saying.
Yes.
And so I think that this is something that is, I don't think I'm alone. I've learned also that I'm not alone. There are other people who perceived the materials and took them in the same way that I did. But I think that we are the majority within the, we are not the majority in the profession. We are the minority in the profession. I think the majority of folks saw the profession as a job, as they learned the theories, they read the stuff, and, you know, it was like, cool, this is the class I have to take. I have to fill out this assignment. I need to turn in these things, and then I'll get the grade, and eventually I'll go do a job. I was taking it in and trying to figure out, like, so what does this look like? How does this operate in my community? So when I say I'm a disruptor, I mean, in my mind, that I'm a social worker, because that's what I thought social work was. And so I don't like S on my chest that I'm a disruptor. It's more of a grief that that's not what we all are. If I could, yeah.
That's such a good point. And we talk about that a lot. Like, that should be the core of social work, is disrupting the status quo and helping and making change and bringing about change. But as we have all seen, that's not necessarily a lot of people's idea of social work in general, but the idea of how to practice social work. And I think, like you said, it is showing up for a job oftentimes.
I celebrate. I think there's a lot of beauty in some of our past generations of social workers that I think baked in little nuggets of reminders for those of us who wanted to figure out a way to make this job a disrupting job. They fed us nuggets of ways that we could be strategic to push back and use strategy. And so, like, as for all my critiques of the profession, I'm also very grateful to it, because I think it taught me. It taught me how to organize. It taught me how to push back. It taught me how to be strategic about pushing back and organizing, strategic about my messaging when I'm saying that we need to change systems. So I think there's a lot of beauty to it. I think those people just happen to be able to shine through. I don't know that that's what social work is. And, you know, like I said, I have a lot of grief in that space.
Yeah. And I also wonder whether the way that social work, I think, is trying to become more scientific, more along the lines of psychology, and standardizing all of these kind of procedures within social work, it takes away from that core as well. And I think we're trying to become something as a field that we're not and that we don't have to be to prove ourselves for some reason.
And yeah, I think I agree with you. And I think that what I worry about is right now I may feel some kind of way different. I may feel differently eventually, but right now I am coming to wonder if that's intentional, because some people don't want us to be, they don't want us to challenge what social work is. They don't want us to take it out of being a job. They don't want us to gain in popularity, you know, being able to have podcasts and social workers are out there listening and hearing about ideas about how they could operate in this profession very differently than maybe the people who are sitting next to them at work are. I think that that's dangerous. I think that's dangerous to a lot of places that don't want anything to change. And so I like to name that for the people who are daring to be change agents, to actually do the job, the people who are daring even to listen to content like this, because, you know, that's dangerous. That's radical. That's pushing back. To begin to allow yourself and allow your brain to think about this profession, this life, this world as something other than what I'm being fed is exactly what is, and that's all it should be. To question, to challenge, to think about things in new ways, that's dangerous. And that's what we do. That's what we do.
Isn't it kind of like, I think it's with us in a lot of different things in the modern world, but it's almost like as social workers, we're supposed to accept what we're given as far as what social work is supposed to be, whereas social work should be something that we're continuously creating, which is the idea of revolution, right? If we don't, as individuals, if you're not continuously revolutionizing yourself, then you're going to be the same person next year. And that's, if we're talking next year, and that's not a good thing. You should be changing and evolving and learning. And I feel like social work is stuck in this way, is that we're continuously having new programs. We have this, we have this, we have this, right? There's a million different CEU things you can go to tomorrow, probably.
Oh, yeah.
But you probably can't find a space where you can like unburden your heart or share or connect or present new ideas. And I just think social work is not, again, it's not something that should be given to us as already created or what it is, or, you know, like, I think also when you're talking about, I think basically what you're saying is it's over professionalized, right? It's, you come and you have to do all these things to get your license or your certification, and then you got to go to work. And I think another thing that disrupts us from being disruptors or from, you know, looking at things differently is that, so you get, let's say you get your bachelor's in social work, your BSW, and you go and you're going to get an advanced standing, you want to get into the field. Well, how the hell are you supposed to question yourself or question anything or look deeper if you are taking 5 graduate classes plus an internship, plus you might got to take care of your family, plus you got a job? Where are you supposed to have the time to do that? And then you move on to the profession, and I think a lot of us take for granted there's a lot of work to be done after, right? You've got to go and get your clinical hours, you got to maybe pass 1, maybe 2 exams. You have to do all of these things, and then you get in there, and a lot of folks have student loan debt. They may have built up other debt, and so you see these advertisements on Indeed or whatever that say, "Oh, you can come make $100,000 as a clinician," and then you look a little deeper, and they're trying to get you to work like 80 hours a week or seeing like 50, 60 clients a week.
Yes.
Well, you obviously, if you're doing all that, you don't have much time to think in a different way, right? So I think, like you said, I think that it's hard to say like that it's a direct plan, because who's making that plan? But it seems that, you know, the powers that be, that it's intentional in a way. Social workers would be the very best people in the world to disrupt and look at things differently, because most of us come into the field, not all of us, most of us come because maybe something happened to us or an experience or a series of experiences, and then you come to the field and you want to make a difference, right? You're like, oh, I want to help people, and I want to make sure that they don't have to go through that or use my experience to help them. So we'd be the best ones if we had the space to do it, the time, the money, and it was fostered by organizations like, say, the NASW or the CSWE.
But that work doesn't make money.
Yeah.
That work makes the world a better place, but it doesn't produce capital. It doesn't generate money. And we don't, as a collective community, we don't invest in things, and we don't give money to things that don't generate money. We focus on the money, not the experience, not the life, the money. not the caring for others, the money. And it always, everyone returns back to that. Exactly.
Isn't that the first thing you often hear with social work? There's no money in it.
Yeah, you're not
But
going to
we
make any
should
money.
generate a lot of money for other people by burning ourselves out.
Yes.
I mean, the amount of reimbursement that I see so say if I have a client and I'm working in a healthcare organization and they get a bill and I see that bill and I'm like, holy moly, that's how much they're charging you. They ain't paying me that per hour.
And from my entrepreneurial experience, I bet you that organization isn't even bringing in that much money on the individual level. The insurance company is making a whole lot of money because they're siphoning the money from all of the people and hoarding it and paying pennies to the organization to provide the service because they don't actually want people to get better and well. They don't actually want to invest in a healthy community because then they would not have a pipeline for producing profit. So there's just like layers on layers of people who are there are people who are heavily invested in making sure that we don't make change, that people aren't well. They do not want a happy, healthy, working community because they would not be able to profit off of there being a happy, healthy, working community. Yep.
I was way back in the day before I got my social work degrees. I supervised the juvenile treatment center, and I think this was actually before I was a supervisor. I was the leader of the conduct disorder girls unit, and my unit was doing really, really well. We had like 3 really good leaders, and we had a lot of good staff, and the kids were great. And we were bought out by Universal Health Services, who owns most of the juvenile treatment facilities around the country at this time. And almost immediately when they came in, they had this big, staff meeting with this guy that looked like the Monopoly man. And he came in, he's like, yeah, nothing's going to change. We promise you. It's all going to be the same. And they fired all of the administration, like the CEO, the people that created the place. So they sold it to them and said they were going to keep it the same, and they fired everyone. But then, so like I said, my unit was doing well. So we're writing good notes, right? This is back in the day when you still wrote them actually in a chart.
Paper.
And as the leader of the unit, I'm in charge of my staff. And so they come, we were talking about Vita the other day, my old friend Tavita McCullough. And they took this Monopoly man guy from Universal Health Services, brings us in, me and Vita. And he's like, yeah, you guys have been doing a good job over there on, what's called the Delta unit. On Delta, yeah. And we're like, yeah, we're proud of it. And we're talking about the girls. And he's like, we just want to commend you on how good of a job you're doing, but there's something we got to talk to you about. And basically they told us that our staff were writing too positive of notes, and they don't have any justification to keep those kids in that treatment center if they're doing so well. And so to make sure that we're problem focused, so you go through, this is before I went to education, right? But one of the main tenets of at least the undergrad social work I did is solution focused, right? Solution focused. Well, we were doing solution focused shit.
You're solving stuff.
The Monopoly man from UHS, he didn't like that. And it didn't give them a good chance to keep those kids in there like they need, because they were making bank off those kids. Those kids were from back east, Alaska, Hawaii, and they were paying them a lot because obviously those states weren't capable or whatever to do it at those times. But isn't that crazy telling you to write?
Like, that's just sad that is the reality. And I think that that's a reality in a lot of agencies. And again, we're just stuck there unless we collectively organize and push back and like say that this is not acceptable. And I'm sure you guys know, like I know, that being the person who's like, well, but maybe we don't want to, or like trying to do something different, again, you become the nuisance for trying to center the people and make sure that their well-being is taken care of, while others are like, no, we're supposed to be doing a good job. We always get back to like doing the good job, making the organization look good. And like, why is that our value? Didn't we learn in our classes like not to place the value there? But I'm worried. I'm worried with current events, if I'm honest with you guys. I'm worried about the community, and I don't think that as a collective whole, like as social workers, I don't think that we are in position and ready to protect our clients. I think there are going to be a lot of social workers who allow for abuse and who are the gatekeepers for that abuse. and they will look for justification to say that they didn't do anything wrong.
Yeah.
And just so I'm not sounding like I'm just making something up, I think that there will be people who are writing down that people are questioning their gender when they don't need to write down that information, and that information can then be used against clients. And when you try to tell people that they should not be writing down that information because it could be used against their clients, they're going to say, well, but I'm supposed to keep detailed notes, but I'm supposed to do this thing that's following the rules. And it's just so frustrating to me that we are at a place where we're not understanding what our job is.
Yeah.
Like we don't get it.
Right. And I think because oftentimes when we're working under other people's values, and that is how we get our paycheck, then it's really hard to live in our values and beliefs, right? Because then we do become the nuisance, and we could lose our job. And then how do we support our families? Like we're stuck in that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm glad you said that, because I think that that's a point that I sometimes get blind to, being in entrepreneurship now for 4 years. And this is one reason, like small side note tangent. This is why I think that everybody should get an LCSW.
Yes.
Because it's allowed me to work for myself and with my own values. And so I get to engage with my clients on my values. And even if I go and take a job with someone else, I know that I am there as long as I feel comfortable operating under those values. If and when I decide that those values are no longer in line with my values, I am so grateful to have the flexibility to say, yeah, I'm going to go do something that's in line with my values, and I'll make my own money myself. So that's the reason I'm always like, everyone should get the C, not because I think clinical work is like the God that some people think that it is. I just think that being able to get out of working under somebody else's values is freeing.
Yeah. So freeing. But I think there's two things there, because one, it's scary to not have the way we're conditioned anyway, it's scary to not have the PTO or the sick leave or just an organization that protects you legally, all of those things. So it's scary, but also people don't know how to go the entrepreneurial route. We're not taught that in school, right? We're not taught that. We're taught about how to go into other organizations.
No, we're not taught that in school, because the school is receiving funds from the Department of Child Services in order to give a track for people to get their degree for free, right? So the school is invested in making sure you get a job in community mental health, because the community mental health company pays money to the university. They are in the meetings talking about what you're learning. Your local hospitals and stuff have folks who are influencing the curriculum that you're receiving. You're paying for your own job training to go work in community mental health, unless you disrupt that pattern.
Yeah. Yeah. Where do you, I don't know how much you can go into this, but where do you see that in the university, of the ways that we're not teaching those entrepreneurial skills?
Well, I think obviously every professor and every department and everything is going to have a little bit of diversity in it. But for the most part, the issue for me is the conformity, is that, no, I'm a professor, right? There's very little incentive to be a good teacher. There's no incentive for me to meet with the students, for me to give feedback. I guess you get evaluations, but I've been, from an adjunct, I've been a professor for like almost 10 years now, and I've never had anybody talk to me about my evaluations, and they've always been really good. But nobody's ever said, hey, Christian professor, we were going through your evaluations, and, they're really good. And so we want to build on that. And, maybe you can, and instead for one, like here at University of Alaska Fairbanks, they took away summer work. And so you have the summers off, which is cool. You get the summers off, but they didn't take anything away from the workload. So you're coming a week before the semester starts. You have 1 week to plan all your courses. You got a week to get in all the workload shit that they want you to do. They put you on all these committees. They have you doing all these other things. And all of those things, if you were to create a hierarchy, they don't literally have one, but on what people would come to me about what you're not doing versus doing, it would always be those other things. And I think the Council for Social Work Education, the CSWE, while obviously we need something to show that we're providing the education that the students need, I don't really see the CSWE as doing that. I see it as, they want you to have on your syllabus that demonstrates that you're doing this competency or this competency, and they want you to show this. But there's no evidence that you have to execute it well, or you have to do this or do anything, and so someone like me often gets scrutinized because I like to provide options for students. And even if I have a paper and a student comes to me and says, hey, I really think I could do this orally. Like, say I have an Indigenous student comes to me and they say, I really think I could do this orally and get the same thing across. Well, I'd be all about it. But I think other folks would scrutinize me because I'm not conforming to what was preordained beforehand. And so, like, any kind of dissent in that regard it's frowned upon, really. And then the other side of it, I would say, is what I was going back to what I mentioned earlier about, so let's take something like decolonizing social work or any kind of like resistance type of movement in that way. Well, I think if I were to go back 10 years, and it's hard to always compare times, things change, but if I were to go back to University of Hawaii when I was a graduate student, even an undergrad before that, but it felt like there was a lot more organizing and collective gathering in an actual place. And I'm not saying it doesn't, because everywhere's different, and we've been in Alaska, so. But it seems like there was a lot more of that. And so, like, say, Black Lives Matter at the time, it was very organic, and everybody's coming listening to these ideas, and we're gathered because we really don't know what it means, what it's going on. So we're talking about it. Whereas today, I think if you were to say, even like Black Lives Matter, but even like decolonizing social work, if you were to go somewhere, whether it's a college class, a workshop, whatever, it would often be something that the people are coming there and they're going to give you that information, right? They're going to pass it on to you. So it's like Paulo Freire and the banking model of education, where education is something where I've got the information and I'm going to pass it on to you.
Yeah.
But from my perspective when it comes to things like that, if you really want to individually and collectively have the experience be transformative, well, you've got to be able to talk and listen to each other. So you have to have opportunity for like a talking circle or some kind of dialogue. And then you guys are bouncing ideas. You're going around in the circle. I'm learning about you. You're learning about me. And that's how you really, in my opinion, you really learn and you move forward in those ways. So you can't have a workshop on decolonizing the classroom and then go and do it the Western way, that if that makes sense, and think you're going to give us the information, because I think Bob Marley, right? You can't educate me. We've got to come together and we've got to find unity, and that's where the real education happens, the real transformative education. There's nothing that you can come and just tell me, and I'm going to be like, oh yeah, now I get it. You know what I mean? We need those opportunities.
100%, I agree with you. I think what has been scary for me when I've taught classes is that I don't know that everyone even has the skills to do that. Yeah. Like, I've noticed in classes when I'm wanting us to have a conversation, people are so anxious about giving me the right answer or saying the right thing in a class discussion, when I'm wanting us to share ideas and maybe we get it wrong. Like, maybe you say, I read this reading and I came away with this, this, and this. And somebody else might say, like, I took it a totally different way. And that's not confrontational. That's not mean. There's so much learning that could happen in that space, but everyone there would have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, not being the expert all the time, having to be a learner. And like, there's vulnerability there. And that's where I worry that we're losing people's ability to sit in the discomfort of being a learner so that we can learn new information, think of new ideas, consider new points of view. Instead, it's almost like people think everything is already figured out. The figuring out part is done. You just need to I just now need to be told how to do. And like, we're very much still figuring out what it means to be a human, how humans interact with the world. Like, we're very much still figuring out what it means to do social work. We're still building it, like you were saying earlier, Ace. Like, there's a piece of this that is art. It's not like a fixed, finite thing. We are creating, we are designing. And sometimes you have to erase. Sometimes you make mistakes, happy mistakes, and you make adjustments. And we can all do that and build something beautiful. But if some people are like, no, we have to just color in this coloring book. Like, the lines are already defined for us. it's just it's so frustrating for me. I'm still in a place right now of frustration and a little bit of anger with people who I feel like are trying to hold everyone back and hold us all to like, no, we just have to do these certain things. This world, this existence could be so much more beautiful if we allowed ourselves to. But I don't know. I sense a fear all the time in us even trying to build something different.
I like what, you kept mentioning, something that we create and we create it together, right? So social work is not something that we're given or was that somebody made up for us. It's something that in the times and the world's always changing, right? Even 10 years ago, like I was saying, it's changed significantly. And so it's something that we have the power to create together. And I think many of us don't realize that we have that power. And what you're talking about, a professor, my very first class I ever taught, I had just a friend who hit me up and said, hey, I think you'd be good to teach this class over here in the sociology department, juvenile delinquency. They didn't give me anything. They just, first time teaching the class, and they just went and did it. But so at first I was just teaching by kind of the textbook, and I was trying to get them to participate in dialogue or discussion, and nobody was saying anything. And I was like, I've got to do something different, because I can't just, it's against my values to just come in here and do it this way. Like, we've got to figure out something. So I introduced talking circles, and at first many of the students didn't say much, and then as the semester went on, more of them were sharing, and now I use them all the time to huge success. But I received several emails and students contacting me after that class, and one in particular that I remember, a student, her name was Mahina, I think, and she said, I just wanted to say thank you, because I came to this class and you were asking us to talk about things, and I didn't think I had anything to say. I didn't think I had any knowledge. I didn't think I had anything to offer. And then through the talking circles, I realized I had all sorts of knowledge and information in this regard, and I just want to say thank you for not putting any pressure on us to do it and just letting it unfold naturally. And then just moving forward, I teach online asynchronous classes now. I haven't taught in person really, besides the cohort, since the pandemic. And I hold voluntary talking circles, meaning they don't have to, they don't have to come. I do them 3 times a week. And I get like between 10 and 20 students that come every time, and they share things. They unburden their heart. But most of all, they listen to each other. They sit there. Sometimes it's supposed to be an hour. Sometimes it goes like on for an hour and a half because people talk a lot. Most of the students, like 99% of them, stay and they listen and they show up for each other. And I think that based on my experience as a professor, but also as a social worker working with troubled kids, troubled adults, is that people are dying to have space where they can just be themselves, their authentic selves, and talk about things and not have to worry about somebody scrutinizing what they said or whatever. And we need those opportunities. We got to create those opportunities somehow in social work, because they're not there right now.
No. You said something that like scratched an itch for me with some other folks that I work with. I often work with clinicians who are learning to enter private practice or exploring that journey. And when you mentioned that your student was like, I don't know, I didn't know that I had something to share, or I didn't realize that I had a point of view. So often when I'm working with clinicians who are learning to go into private practice, they believe that they have to make their practice look like what their community mental health center that they used to work with looked like, or something that they've seen before. And I will ask them, like, do you like to go on hikes? Do you want to have a walk and talk therapy practice? Do you want to be a therapy practice that visits people's home? Do you want to be somewhere that has an office? Like, what do you want this to look like? And the look of like shock on people's face often of like, you mean I can do this how I want to? Like, yes, you can create. Yes. What do you want? How do you want to do this social work job? How do you want to be a clinician? What kind of clinician do you want to be? Who are the clients that you want to serve? How do they like being serviced? Like, let's think about these things. Let's get creative. And it's like a light bulb goes off because people have not even considered that, oh my gosh, 1, I can have a point of view. And then 2, let me pause and reflect and think. What is my orientation? Yeah. How do I want to practice? That can be a whole can of worms of work for folks before they can even get to the part of doing the work of being revolutionary.
Yes. It's just from you say that, because I have a friend who's going into private practice now and leaving an organization. And she has said like she needs multiple weeks to deprogram what she has been through for years and years, because we go through it and then we're like you say, well, how do I do this now? I know what I don't really like, but now what do I like? What do I want to do? And is that possible? And I think we don't realize how many possibilities there are in social work because we've created this little box of staying here.
We're stifled.
Nothing about doing therapy has to do with sitting on a couch. Like, you don't have to do that. Everybody doesn't have to have that set up at all. Right.
It always brings me back to one of my favorite things that Angela Davis says is, you can't, how are we ever going to have anything different if you can't imagine it to be different? And so students need to be using their exercising, it's imagination, something you got to exercise. And so, like I said, if they've never done it before and never looked at how things might be, then it's very unlikely that it will ever come to fruition. But just a very idea of thinking about it, of imagining it, I mean, I think it increases the chances of those things happening exponentially, like beyond anything that we can quantify. And that's, one of the first and most important steps, thinking about it and imagining it.
Yeah, 100% for me. Like, if I'm not creating in my life, like if I'm not doing art, if I'm not creating, and that can look lots of different ways. Like sometimes for me, that means writing. Sometimes for me, that means like, I recently redecorated my bathroom in my house. And like, that is like me getting my creative. We painted it. I got new fixtures. Like, that's still part of me being artistic and creative. I am such a better social worker. I am such a better therapist when I am actively creating and practicing using my imagination and thinking about ways I can, just reimagine what life could look like, what this bathroom could look like. There's an exercise in that I think strengthens my ability to do the work, because then when my clients have an issue, I'm not like trying to get it to look like one singular thing. I recognize like it could be pink, it could be blue, it could be purple. We can do all kinds of things and it'll all still be good. It can be beautiful. It might not be my style. It might not be what I like, but I can recognize the art in what you're creating of your life. I wouldn't want to live like that, but like, love that for you. It's not hurting anybody. It's creative. It's beautiful. Great job. But like, if I'm stuck at my life has to look a certain way, everything in my home has to be gray farmhouse, exactly like Joanna Gaines. Like, this is all that I can ever have in my life. When I'm stuck there, well, then I hold everybody else there too. Everybody else needs to also be trying to look like this certain thing. And so I think there's a whole conversation to be had about social work and art and the creativity. And I think there's a lot to explore there.
Yep. And what a disservice we may be doing to the people we work with when we are so stifled by other people's boxes and we don't feel like we can imagine or that we can create because we have standardized all these procedures and we're just going along with them.
It's also, bringing it back to money, the insurance companies, because oftentimes it's the insurance companies that dictate the parameters of what kind of services we can provide. I mean, how many times have you been through that conversation where you work somewhere and you're like, I want to try doing this. I'm like, well, only if we can find a way to bill it. You know what I'm saying? And so basically
at this point, I think that social workers work 100% for insurance companies. Like the majority of us, mental health workers in general, we work for insurance companies. Whatever organization, business you think you work for, no, you don't. You work for insurance companies. And they don't know anything about mental health. They don't actually even care about mental health.
No.
But they dictate every single piece of how we provide care to people. Because like we were saying before, if you want to be creative and go on hikes with folks, like, is insurance going to cover that? Is insurance going to cover the liability insurance for that? Is insurance going to allow you to do the work in the way that might be most honest to you and your client? And the answer might be no. And for that reason, that service might not exist. Like, the imagination of where we could go and how we could be healthy, we cannot even pursue because we are beholden to the imprisonment of insurance companies, of capitalism. I also sorry, but related to that, I know a lot of folks generally think about mental health and they think really poorly about private pay. You're supposed to be accept insurance so that you can serve the people who have the most need. And I like to give a little pushback there. One, because having the flexibility of being able to serve people in a way that feels true to the therapist and true to the person without insurance, I think that we do a disservice to put that version of care down. I don't think that that's helping our cause. One. And then two, I think we should challenge the idea we have about who has the most need. Poor folks do not have the highest need for mental health care. That only is true if we believe that poverty is related to like being like you're mentally unwell because of your poverty. I would say that greed would also be a sign that you need to, a reason that you might want to also explore mental health. And so maybe we could be doing a lot more service and a lot more challenging the systems if we allowed our services to be for rich and wealthy people.
And that is very counter.
Some work there. What's up?
That is so counter to what we are taught, to what we are told. You know, like you got to take Medicaid because how are those people going to get services? And then try and bill Medicaid by doing things outside of the box. Like, ain't gonna work.
Nope, they're gonna tie your hands. So just let it go. Let it go. That's what it is. That's the reality of the situation. They do not want you doing that work there. Let it go. Go do the radical work with the person who is willing to pay you $500 a session. Take your check and donate some of it to mutual aid. Yeah. Like, we have the privilege. We've got the access. We can move with it and actually do something to help the communities that we come from.
Yeah, and I just think what you're saying, you know, you look at the current culture. We just had Trump elected, and I don't really use Twitter or X or whatever it's called I don't like post on there, but I just go on there and kind of get a little bit of the news and whatnot. But man, like, for example, Elon Musk, I always try to picture myself if I had a wealth to where I could make a difference or do something. And it seems so simple to me, like, you know, to be generous and to be giving and try to create maybe not the social programs, but just try to make yourself available and open and give back. And I feel like the culture that's being presented right now by people like Elon Musk is that instead if you're rich, you should try to make more money and you should invest hundreds of millions of dollars into stuff like presidential elections or going to space or things like that. And it just forgets our reality of where we're at here as human beings on the earth right now and all of the things that we can do. And so
it's a delusion.
Our culture is the opposite of what you're talking about.
Yes. He's operating to some extent in a delusion of what would happen if he was able to max out being able to produce as much capital as possible. Like, let's play that scenario out completely, Elon. What then happens to the world around you? And if you tell me you don't care about all of those things, what do we say and know in mental health about people who are okay with like causing harm and destruction to other people and say, I don't care about any of the people who are going to be harmed in the process of me getting what I want? Like, that's not healthy. That's not healthy. But we're not there saying that that's not healthy. We're down here saying that people's response to that situation is unhealthy. So, you know, I think that there's more ways for us to practice. I think there's other ways for us to radicalize. Yeah. I think we can and could be giving pushback in other places. I will also say that we know that people who do that often comes from places of hurt and trauma. Not trying to psychoanalyze somebody who's never sat on my couch, but, you know, people joke about it, like Trump's trauma and how he feels about like trying to prove his dad who's dead, like prove to him that he's good enough. Like, people joke about these things like it's a joke, but this is how people operate. This is how people's minds actually work. And if they can find some sort of healing, we also know that people can change and make changes. But that would mean we have to be engaged in that work. I think one of the ways that the system tricks us is that it keeps us holding to like, no, we need to be helping the people who are hurt the most. We're just helping the consequences of a larger system. We know what it is. I think it's time for us to begin operating like we know what it is. Yeah.
You remind me of an article I read way back in like 2016 by Dr. Gabor Mate, and it was called something like The Addiction to Power and the Power of Addiction or something like that. And he's talking about substance abuse, but he also talks about Trump and Hillary. And he talked about, like, if you look at their back, just like you did, we're talking about his father. If you look at them, you can see just how traumatized individuals they are and how addicted they've become to power to try to compensate to overcompensate for those things. And the problem with that, with money and power, is there's no ceiling. So, like, we're talking about Elon Musk, but he doesn't have enough. So if he doesn't have enough and Donald Trump doesn't have enough, then surely none of us will ever have enough if that's if that's the scale that we're going by, right? So we got to find a different way in our culture, I mean, American culture, to look at what do we value and what is true wealth. You know, I did this manifestation exercise and I used W for wealth, but I think when I put wealth, I put a lot of different things than other folks would have regarding money and material possessions. And I was looking at wealth as being healthy, having connection to my family, community, and things like that.
A rich life.
But it's hard for us to look at that in, you know, like I said, in this modern day American world.
Yeah, what you just, with the wealth comment, that reminds me of something, and I'd love to hear what you guys think also. I've noticed with more and more clarity just how often you might be talking to someone and using the same words, but our how we define those words and what we understand them to mean may be vastly different, and how that difference in understanding affects how our day-to-day communication happens. So I think oftentimes, like, we might have a conversation with someone and be like, you know, because I'm just really manifesting and expecting wealth and abundance in the next year. And they're like, oh, you're trying to be rich. Because that's where, like, the operation of their conceptualization of wealth and rich exists. And I don't know how I feel about it personally, but I know I'm playing with, I know that I have both a frustration with, like, I notice sometimes that other people aren't perceiving things in the ways that I'm intending. Sometimes I'm trying to figure out how much I want to, like, leave them there and how much I care to explain, because I think I've spent a lot of my own energy and time trying to figure out getting people to understand the reference for how I'm meaning something like wealth and abundance. And I think maybe I'm kind of landing in this season, and just maybe I'm old and tired, but I'm kind of tired of trying to build that bridge to get people to understand. I just speak to the people who are on the same wavelength as me. I don't know. How do you guys?
I think that also speaks to
just a new thing.
Dialogue, though. No, I think that's why dialogue is so important, because if we just go from, okay, you speak and then I speak and then we walk away, and we may not actually understand each other at all. But if we have, like, the talking circles you do in your class, Ace, and these kind of discussions that we're trying to have and have dialogue, then we come to our understandings are closer together. They may not meet, they may not be the same, they don't have to be the same, but they may be closer together. But we're not doing enough dialogue with each other, or self-reflection, or just any, like, critical thinking. That's not happening so much today, and especially not in social work. It's not happening, which is crazy, because, like you say, like, the impact of not understanding each other and the impact of walking around not being able to create and imagine, and all of these is having a detriment on our field and on ourselves personally. So I just think dialogue is a huge part of that we're missing.
I'm curious. I hear you. Yeah, I agree. And that's how I've been oriented also. And again, I just may be really jaded. Listen, post-Trump's victory, I have a lot of feelings. But I'm starting to notice that we do a lot of explaining, and with that, in doing that, we're also showing our hand. And I just wonder maybe if some people are asking questions and want to understand without any intent. They absolutely know that we're speaking about wealth and abundance differently, and they're okay with that. I don't know. Like, because to me,
yeah,
God, I hate that. Like, for some people, I'm gonna sound like a conspiracy theorist, but, like, there's a noticeable to me that with the percentage of people who voted the way that they did, and I'm just using the election as an example, but enough people see the world in a way where they took the classes, they did the DEI workshops, they did the learning, they were in the book clubs, they said Black Lives Matter, like they were there, but they were just taking in that information. They were just consuming it. It was just something, it tasted good in that season. It tasted good in that time. They enjoyed consuming it. But they had no interest in learning from it. They have no desire in taking it and applying it to their life. Please.
It just makes me think back to a graduate class I was taking at University of Hawaii, and I had a white peer student. We were diving deep, you know, to the history of education in Hawaii. So there was some, like, deep things that we were exploring. And I knew this, I shouldn't say I knew what was in his heart, but I knew, because I think he did have a good heart, but I knew the things that he said and how ignorant that he was about some of about the history of education in America. And I'll just say it. So back then we were doing substantive posts, right? You had to go on and you had to maybe you had to read something, then you had to write a post about it, and then you had to respond to people. Well, in this guy's things, he was always minimizing, like he'd say, like one of his titles was it really that bad? Talking about boarding schools for Native people. And I was like, well, from what I know about it, it was way worse than anything that you could ever imagine. So yeah, it was that bad. But other things like that. And then I saw him at a Black Lives Matter march. And I'm not dissing him for going to that. What I'm saying is that I think it's like what you're saying. Like, so you're involved in this, and yeah, you want to show up for Black people perhaps, but you're not doing the work to really look in deep and see where you are contributing to some of the ideas that have us here in the current state. And so again, it goes back to, I think, like, movements are kind of co-opted in certain ways by the powers that be.
Oh yeah. Yes.
In the modern world. And so you have all kinds of people doing it, but what you don't have is getting deeper and really tugging at yourself and those things that are uncomfortable. Because again, if you think that like boarding schools for Native people wasn't that bad, maybe it wasn't that bad, then you're not, you ain't doing the work, because there's all the evidence in the world out there that you don't even have to look that deep.
100%. 100%. I think there are so many people who do probably enjoy your podcast, who love the work that you do, who have read and seen things I've done or other social work activists. Like there are social workers who are challenging the status quo. And this is a beautiful community of people who are doing that. And I think there are a lot of people who consume our materials. That's why we are popular, right? That's why people have followers on social media platforms. People are consuming it. But based on the evidence of what social work looks like, the majority of those people who are consuming that content are not stopping and thinking about how they can challenge social work where they work. They are not doing any of that work. They are listening to us talk about these things for fun and allowing it to soothe their soul that they are learning. Yeah. But that learning isn't doing anything.
How do we change that?
How do we change that?
Yeah.
I don't know that there's anything for us to do. I think that there's a choice for a lot of folks to just not do. Like, well, AA would teach me, though, that like we just keep educating and eventually they would I know that there are theories here, right, that says like it's okay for people to just take in and consume information and eventually they will apply it. I know that. But I have tension there for myself. But I think of this in a clinical lens. We have clients who might not be ready to make any changes in their life, and we would say like they're not ready to make those changes because they are not ready to make those changes. And so they're going to come into session over and over again and complain about the same things and talk about the same patterns that exist in their life. And they're not ready or desiring in any way to change that pattern and make it something different. There's a hold. There is a probably related to a trauma, probably related to a belief, a value that is keeping them in the loop and in the cycle where they have to keep things as they are, even though they might have new information that tells them that this pattern isn't working. They're still not ready to make a change. And, I have had to learn as a private practice therapist that sometimes it's okay for me to refer people out. I did it long enough. I've done as much as I can. And it's time for me to refer you out because I no longer am able to stretch myself to have a lot of empathy. And this happens for me. It happens for me clinically, sometimes with clients too. Like my clinical bandwidth is like, yeah, so I've been seeing you for 2 years and you're coming in and talking about that same thing over and over again. We've done strategies, we've role played, we've discussed, we've done psychoeducation. And you're just still working on that pattern and it's starting to now trigger something in me. And I need to refer you out so that you can have somebody who can support you where you are.
Yeah. And I think we experience that a lot as therapists, where people are stuck and then we get stuck with them. And so that's it. What you just said, I don't think is talked about in like supervision enough of clinicians, that it's okay to notice that someone's stuck and you don't have to sit there with them. And we talked a little bit the other day about like acceptance and commitment therapy. Like how do you use that in your work to then help people either get past that stuck point or to just live in their values to move through that stuck point? Like how does that work?
So, there's different strategies within acceptance and commitment therapy for getting people out of that stuck point. So, like, often I use like a choice point. It's like a tool of recognizing like where they're stuck and like what they want to move towards versus what they want to move away, pulling back to the values that we set at the beginning of practice so that we can get them back on track to like which direction or moving how would move you more or less in line with your values. What I also like about acceptance and commitment therapy is it allows me to say like, so I'm noticing a pattern where you're choosing where you don't want to take the exit. I do this analogy with like a highway in Indianapolis. Our highway is like a circle. We're also a circle city. So there's a highway that goes around. So I will refer to 465, the highway that goes around the city, and like you keep missing your exit. Every time you come around, you keep missing your exit. And so like there's a pattern I'm noticing where you're missing that exit. We can accept that you don't want to exit. And some people panic right there and they're like, no, I want to exit. Okay, but you're showing me that you do not want to exit. So we can figure out how to explore why it is that you don't want to exit. If you want to explore that, we can figure out, building strength and skills so that you feel more confident in exiting when you're ready. We can do those kind of things, but we're not going to not deny the reality that you're not exiting. And that part of the work I cannot do for you. And so we're going to accept that reality and commit to how we're going to move forward therapeutically within knowing that you are continuously maintaining this relationship with someone who has shown you multiple times that they are not committed to your best interest. You are not okay with doing anything to end ties with that relationship, and that's okay. But we're going to operate with the knowing that you're choosing this. It's uncomfortable. So is growth.
I think we've, again.
Yes, exactly.
Again, thinking about culture in the United States of America and what we have developed into, and we've been hoodwinked in a way to think that oftentimes our problems are a part of us and that they're an actual part of our character. I lived most of my life this way, I think based upon my past, and I had to present myself in a certain way as this wounded individual and whatnot. And I realized over time that the only thing that was keeping me from moving on was I was holding on to that shit so tight. And I'd even see therapists here and there, whatever, and they talk to me, but I'm just holding on to this. I wasn't going there with the willingness and the know-how that I could just let it go and move forward. I don't mean to minimize it, that it's that simple, but in the big scheme of things, it kind of is. And we're the ones that are holding on to it.
Yeah. I think sometimes when you get to the other side, after you exit, you recognize that it was really simple. When you're in it, it does not feel that simple. But I think on the other side, then you were often like, wait, that's all that was. So, there's a privilege of being able to talk and being on the other side. But I'm so, what I like to share with people is I'm so glad for myself that I chose the exit. And I have made a commitment to myself that when I find myself in a pattern that is no longer serving me, I will choose the exit, even when it's scary. I will choose the exit with tears in my eyes. I will choose the exit with as many of the people I can bring along as I can. But if I must take the exit by myself for me and how I care about and love me, I will always choose the exit, because I will not be stuck in a loop of doing things that harm me and just allowing it to happen. If it means I have to face consequences for choosing the exit, then I will face the consequences. I can't do that to Charla. And I'm so grateful that I've built community with other people, particularly my husband. But I'm very grateful to have community with folks who I think also give me space to choose the exit that it makes me feel safe. And they might be like, we got to get off here. I didn't know okay, you said that that's okay. I trust that if you feel that you need to get off of this, then I'll go with you. And I'm so grateful for those relationships.
Makes me think of, you mentioned relationships, and I think a big reason I was able to take that exit was getting into a relationship, not just a relationship, but I had a foundation, right? No matter what I do, at least it's within my character, obviously, I come home and my family's going to love me no matter what. And that's a big thing for me versus the individuality that we market in today's world where you're responsible for everything. Well, I just wasn't cutting it on my own. And to be able to have that foundation allowed me to let go of some of that other stuff. And you also made me think, I really like your idea because we have, where I grew up too, we have the same I-215 that runs around. And I think of like sometimes when I go back and visit old friends or whatnot, you got to jump back on that interstate, right? And they're still going around it. And so it's really weird. They don't get why you are existing outside of there, why you got off. And then it's really hard to talk to them about anything because they still going around the same loop over and over again. And I long left it. And so it's confused. Why would you want to keep going around on the loop? Don't make any sense.
Sometimes people get mad at you.
Yep.
From my experience, people get mad at you that you
Absolutely.
happen to live a life that's not on the loop. Who do you think you are that you're so special that you don't live on the loop? You don't have to be on there neither. Use me as an example and a shining light of like, you take this exit. That's how I did it. Like, you can ask me questions. Dude, I love being at the feet of other people who I've seen take exits that I'm thinking about. Like, I will be quick on the TikTok, on the YouTube, on the whatever of like, who else has already done this? Who else has already explored this area? How can I learn from them on like how to navigate it? I am so like my energy is not on like even coping with the loop. I'm trying to prepare myself for the exit so I can know how to be successful there. Like, yeah. But like, I also had to come to that from regulating my nervous system and getting to a place where I could feel safe and comfortable to be able to do that. And so again, there's a lot of revolutionary work that can be done in mental health care, in clinical practice, helping people get to a place where they can begin imagining that an exit is possible. Like, there's back to that imagination thing we were talking about earlier, like, people have to be able to get there. And we just we're not taught to do that. We're taught to be on the loop and to work the loop. And if you're not a change agent, if you don't challenge things, then you'll just stay there.
Well, that's a step in the process too, right? Is if you might be going around that loop, but you may never even saw the exit before. So now that you see an exit, you may choose not to get off, but at least it's there. And you have, you see, maybe you're imagining what might be off that exit, a nice little paradise for you or something or whatever. And then, just move a little bit towards it.
Yeah. And this whole conversation, it like adds another layer for me for revolutionary social work, that I think this is what we're missing is knowing as social workers that we have choices and that we oftentimes just stay in that loop. Like, we stay in that organization. We stay doing the same things. We stay being burnt out, and we may see the exit, but then we just stay on the loop. And so that's a huge part of, thanks for bringing that to us, like, of revolutionary social work, is seeing those choices and taking the exit and doing the inner work and imagining something different.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a missing piece where people don't even know how to get off the exit. So I think, there's going to come some danger where it's going to be dangerous for folks who are not exiting. I think that's where, like, when I think of who I'm speaking to a little bit, I want to make sure to encourage those who have the ears to hear, to like, beware, because it might get dangerous not to take the exit, right? Eventually it can get dangerous, and set some boundaries so when it gets to this point, it will no longer work for me. And watch yourself if you arrive there and you keep pushing it back. Because, these are the things that we know are dangerous. And I just imagine that some people's workplace are going to start saying, you need to ask every client that you see if they are a legal U.S. citizen. You need to start questioning every client about their gender identity or when the last time they had their period. You can oops, sorry, my bad. I missed that part of my notes. I always forget to ask those questions. Like, you can push back, or you're going to get stuck, or we're just going to keep pushing back the goalposts, because we as a profession were already pushed when we were responsible. As a profession, we were responsible for hosting children in cages. And we resisted. We didn't resist at all. As a whole, as a profession, we didn't resist at all. We allowed our profession to be used in placing those children and losing that information with no resistance from any of our big organizations. or as a system. We're going to keep being pushed back and challenged. How far will we go? How much will we sell out our community? Some schools are training their social workers with police.
Yes. Yeah.
This is the reality that we practice
How far
under.
will we go?
Yeah. I am curious. I think I don't know that a lot of folks have even taken a pause to figure out like how long they're going to just keep pushing this whole thing. Just let it just roll over and let it take over. And I'm concerned.
I think something that every social worker, any educator, anybody in these kind of roles can ask themselves is, am I client focused, student focused, or is my priority with the institution or with the agency that I work for? And which lines am I willing to cross based upon my values? Like you said, crossing, putting a little resistance by not asking a certain question that doesn't align with what you believe or your values or just what you think is right. Because, I've gotten a lot of those forms and there's some odd questions on there sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah. You have any thoughts?
Yeah. No, it is. And we were talking a little bit about when you had to step away, just sometimes we're tied to that because we need that paycheck. And so it's scary to not, go along with it because then our job is at risk, but then the ability to take care of our family is at risk. And so it is a big
But
reason,
it's
like
always
you said,
at
Charlotte,
risk.
to get that C, to get the LCSW. So there's options.
Yes.
Yeah.
But there's always a risk.
Yeah.
There's even a risk with the C that they're going to roll that back and say that I can't do something, right? Like all of our rights are only righted to us as long as those who say that we're allowed to have those rights allow us to have those rights. They're never actually rights. We only have them as long as somebody gives them to us. So all of our jobs are always on the line. We are always at risk of the abuse. What we can do is we can set boundaries for how far it can go. And will we receive consequences at that point? Absolutely. But it's a matter of, do you face them now or do you wait until a third of your community has been rounded up and no longer lives there? Like, do we wait until we have signs that you cannot deny that we are living in like a fascist state? How far are you going to wait until we have that evidence? Do the words not matter? Do the threats not matter? I mean, again, let's take this to an interpersonal relationship and what we know clinically. If someone is making threats like they would hurt you, that's not a healthy relationship. If someone is saying, if you don't do these things how I want you to do them, you will be hurt, that's not a healthy relationship. And as a collective, we are saying that that's allowed. I know that abusers escalate when they're given permissions like that. And so part of my call is also to those of us who are revolutionary, who are people who push back, who have spent our careers pushing back, is to recognize that we do not have the allyship around us that we might have thought we do. A lot of people are not.
It's lonely.
It's very lonely. And I think some of us are in danger even because I don't, as the abuse ramps up, I don't know that we have the safety of our institutions to protect us. I think that they will sell us out.
Highly likely.
Yeah, we're definitely headed into some dangerous times as Americans, as human beings. And I think there's a lot of nefarious powers that be that don't have our interests at heart. And it's hard because we're only one person each, right? And we live in our own communities and our own worlds. And how do you make a bigger difference on the larger scale of things? And I think that's what gets people down.
I agree. I mean,
we have, I think a lot of people come into social. Well, go ahead.
I was just going to say, like, I think if we look at, Dr. Stettler at Houston, and when he was removed from his position as dean for his advocacy work, and he did not get support and pushback from our institutions to ensure that that's not allowed. We are not doing that. That is not how this operates. I think that was a signal to all of us that our jobs are not going to protect us. That our institutions are not going to protect us if our jobs require us to begin bending the knee. They are not going to help to ensure, that we, support us in doing the work in a radical way. And so we need to be smart. We need to be strategic about how we move forward because we don't have institutional support to do this work. And this work can be dangerous work. It can become dangerous work.
I think further when you're talking about Alan Detlef is that most social workers don't even have any idea of, and this is not dissing him at all. I think he's one of the most important people in the profession right now. What I'm saying is that I think most people are so in their tunnel vision of what they've got going on that they don't know who he is. They don't know that that happened to him. They don't know that it might happen to them if, they were in a similar situation. And that's also a reflection, like I've said, about social work as the organizations that should have a responsibility that, you should have your own interpretation of what happened to Alan Detlef. Everybody shouldn't agree exactly, but damn sure what should be happening is, as social workers, we should be having that conversation and we should be looking deeper into it. But we are not doing that. I'm not saying not as any individuals or whatever, but as a collective, absolutely we're not doing that right now.
We should look into
and that's not supported.
Because he lost his job for pushing back. And again, social workers did not lose their jobs or their licenses when they held kids in cages. So 1 + 1 is 2. And to me, like, we got to take in the math and recognize how our institutions move. And I have been on the side of like, no, they just need more information. We can get them to change. We can help them to see. And I'm beginning to understand that I don't think that they care to. I think a whole lot of people are absolutely okay with operating in this way.
Yeah.
I think in social work or academia, you're hated on much more for going against the status quo and going against the norms. Like, for example, the most emails that I've received for the podcast, for either of the podcasts, is when we started talking about Israel and Gaza. And we've tried to do it from a real neutral perspective and just look at it, because I was uninformed when it first went down. I heard Angela Davis and other folks talking about Palestine over the years, but I really didn't know. And I think that's where I've gotten the most hate, the most pushback, is whenever I've tried to step outside the people that write me, they never want to talk deeper about it. They either want to educate me or tell me I'm a piece of shit for it. You know what I mean? And so it just continuously reinforces this adherence to the status quo and to this and to that. And there's very, very little dissent, very little of anything. So social work at dissent to me is like antithetical to what social work is right now.
Yeah.
Most social workers, and I don't mean to put people down. And revolutionary social work is looking at ourselves first. But I've been that person, so I feel like I can look a little deeper in that way. And we are just not willing, as social workers, as a collective, as a profession, we are just not willing to put in a little dissent and look at things differently. And part of that is, I think you mentioned it earlier a little bit, Charla, is just like being afraid to talk about things. And if you say the wrong thing, then you're going to be scrutinized. And, I think a good example is I have a friend of ours that we've known for a while, and they've asked me to refer to them as them and they. And I messed up like a couple times, like on live podcasts, and it was unintentional, but rather than like hitting me up and telling me what a piece of crap I am, which I've seen other people do it hasn't really happened to me. It's people like them have just said, hey, look, you said this again, and I talked to you about it. And, we have a conversation, and I'm not perfect, and I try to do better. And to me, that's the way it should be, because somebody shouldn't be scrutinized when they had good intentions and they didn't say what someone else thought was the appropriate thing at the time.
If somebody needs to get angry with me and get mad at me about me not doing something and how I should have done something, I can absorb some of that. Like, okay, you're like, and then like hear it. Like, okay, you're mad. I didn't do something how you asked me to. You asked me more than once. I made a mistake. I can wholeheartedly apologize. I can try again, and I will do my best. And the fact that you're mad at me doesn't have to necessarily crush who I am. Like, I can know that I made a mistake and also know that I hurt somebody in the path of my mistake. And if that person's mad at me for it, they have every right to be mad at me for making for the fact that my mistakes caused them harm. And so if they have to be mad at me and get mad at me, like, I owe them that space. I owe them the time to be upset with me because I did cause harm. I did do something and show up in a way that hurt them. and I'm not a perfect person. I know that that's going to be part of my journey. And when I hit those pieces, I owe the people who I hurt the space to say that they're hurt. I owe those folks an opportunity to get mad. And all I can do is move forward and do better. But before I do, they deserve that space to acknowledge and say, and I owe them the acknowledgement of the reality of like, yeah, I did do that. It wasn't intentional, all of that. Yes, sure. But it doesn't change the fact that you were hurt. And you're right. I messed up. That doesn't mean I'm a bad person.
We should all be approaching it with empathy.
Yeah.
With empathy, right?
Yeah.
Empathy towards each other, and empathy to know that we're not perfect and we make mistakes. Empathy to know that our mistakes can hurt somebody, even if it was unintentional. And looking at each other like that, like I said, with an open heart and acknowledging that we're not perfect. We're human beings, and most of us are trying to do the best that we can. And it's a journey, right?
It's a
journey.
Yeah, it is.
If I've lived in a world, right, that everything's been a duality of he and she, him and her, it's not for everyone, are not just going to be able to snap their fingers and take that out of their mind. It takes work over time, right?
Yep.
It's a journey.
Yeah, you have to be willing to do the work.
Yeah.
That's a huge part
I'm trying
of it.
to find that
And I
exit.
think,
I promise. I'm trying.
Yeah, exactly.
I just keep missing because I'm so used to driving past it.
I'm trying. No, I'm trying.
Yeah. So I hear the kiddos moving around in there, and I think there's so much more that we can probably talk about, Charla. But one thing I wanted to just finish with, the things that we do is like a challenge that we can just share with our fellow social workers. And I think I would love to hear from you if there's anything that you could challenge people to think about or to practice or to look at differently. Curious, what would your challenge be for our audience?
My challenge would be for social workers to get creative, to find a way to express themselves with art, or some ways for them to explore who they are, to fall in love with themselves, to believe that they are deserving of all of their own hopes and desires, that their wildest dreams could actually possibly come true. I want social workers to recognize that they do not have to be in community with people who do not have their best interests at heart, who do not care for them and love them as they deserve to be treated, and to look for spaces where that can happen. For some people, hearing me say that might sound like that's not like revolutionary work, but I think that it is. And I know and believe fully with my whole heart that if you engage in that work for yourself, it will reflect out in the world.
Beautiful.
Sounds revolutionary to me.
Yeah, it certainly does. Thank you for that. Thank you so much. Do you have any challenges to share this week?
My challenge would be simple: is to look in the mirror, look inward. And I think this podcast is an example. There's a few times where I was sharing about something, and then I could think of examples with both of you where you shared something after, and you made me think a little deeper about it. And you're like, you know what? I can look at that a little bit differently now. And I think that I move closer toward you and towards you, if that makes sense. And I think even if we look at after this, certainly things that you said are going to hit me residually, and it's going to create a change that takes me along the journey. And so I just wanted to say thank you for both of you for your honesty and for your authenticity. I feel like I am a better person as a result of participating, but listening to both of you. So I just want to say thanks. And as social workers, let's seek these opportunities and listen to each other. And also, take that time to look inward and see where we can make a change. And if you make that change, it'll ripple outward, and you'll come across more people like Alicia and Charla, and you'll have those opportunities. And you'll make these little gradual changes. And next thing you know, you'll come back in a year and you'll think, wow, I've grown so much. I'm so glad that I've done this work.
Yeah, that is so true. That's why I love these conversations, because you pick up other people's thoughts and ideas, and then they start to like meld with yours, and then you just continue expanding, but you have to be open to doing that. So I think this week for my challenge is really that imagination part, and being able to just not take for granted that sometimes we just sit in that box unknowingly, and to be able to imagine, what do you want your life to be like? What do you want to do every day in your life? Envision it, imagine it, feel it, manifest it. That's really what manifestation is, right? And so I think we need to do that more as individuals, but as social workers too. Like, how can we practice social work? What do you imagine? So that is my challenge for everyone this week. And thank you so much, Charla. It's been a wonderful conversation. And like I said, I hope you can come back and we can keep chatting, because I think there's a lot more we can dive into.
Would love to.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. Thanks again for joining us. I hope that we can, maybe we'll meet in person someday. You never know what kind of events we could get going on.
Yeah, for sure. Well, yes, so hopefully we'll have Charla back on. But for now, taking all of our challenges, be revolutionary, and then we will be back for another episode, hopefully next week.
All right. Take care, Charla.
Charla, see you.
You've been listening to the Revolutionary Social Work Podcast, and we just want to say thank you for your continued support. You can catch us on YouTube, Apple Music, and Spotify. Remember to like and subscribe, and don't forget to share our content with the world. But most of all, never forget to keep being revolutionary. Peace.